All right, welcome everyone to our Anatomy of an MCAT question session. We're super excited that you're all here with us tonight. My name is Petros. I am here at med school headquarters, heading up our MCAT prep division and experienced MCAT faculty member myself. Spent the last 25 years plus working on all things MCAT, including curriculum development, faculty training, all the fun stuff, everything that goes into getting you to wear a white coat and be successful on this exam. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you and kind of walk you through all the things that you should be thinking about in regards to the MCAT. And really what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through a question. I mean, just to be very clear, we're going to use one question just so you can kind of see how the MCAT works. More importantly, how the MCAT is sometimes actually trying to trick you, and how you can start thinking differently about this exam and start kind of your preparation journey and get underway as far as all the things that are going to be necessary to be successful on this exam. We've got two different chats. We've got one that says introduce yourself, so you can use that to introduce yourself. I'd love to know kind of where everybody is chiming in from and where you are in your MCAT journey. So if you're retesting, or you're going to be testing in the next couple months, or you're testing next year, I'd love to hear kind of what that is. So feel free to use the introduce yourself chat for that. And then if you have questions as we go through the course of this session here today, feel free to ask them in, you guessed it, the Ask a Question chat. So there'll be the two places that we'll use as we go through this. And Erica's testing next year. Very good. So Erica, you're ahead of the curve, right? So you're not testing next week. As it were. I don't think there is a test actually next week, so probably a little later than that. But that being said, Ask Questions is a session designed for you. So this is meant to be informative for you as far as getting your questions answered, but more importantly, kind of getting you thinking about the MCAT and thinking about the MCAT correctly along the way. So we always have lots and lots of free events here at med school headquarters, lots of free resources. Part of the reason why I'm here is for us to be able to have more free resources and more events related to the MCAT. So we'll be offering those along the way as the year progresses. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about really kind of how to prepare for the MCAT. And unfortunately, I can't answer this question with just one slide, right? There's no such thing as kind of the perfect answer to this. It's actually a pretty multifaceted type of approach, but we'll show you kind of what we mean by this. So really what I want you to kind of think about as you're putting together your own kind of plan for studying for the MCAT is to really understand the purpose and the nature of the exam. I mean, why does this thing exist? And I can assure you, it doesn't exist just to put gray hairs on your head, which, maybe, has anyone ever felt that the thing is just this horrible exam that's there for, it's like some people sitting in a room going, let's see how we can make pre-med's lives even more difficult than they already are. I mean, so if you feel that way, you're not alone in any way. The exam is there very simply to create at least one standard thing that every single applicant is being measured against. That's the bottom line. It's the only part of your application, the only thing that the admissions offices see, that everyone has been measured against the exact same metric, right? We go to different undergraduate institutions, even at the same undergraduate institution, there are different standards for different professors, right? So it's the only one thing on the application that everybody has been tested and is being measured on the same kind of metric. Part of the reason why the MCAT also exists, quite frankly, is to make sure that you are prepared to go to medical school. So back in the 1940s, I mean, I know this is like eons ago, so you didn't think you were getting a history lesson, but you're getting a history lesson. There was no MCAT back in the 1920s and 1930s. And so, and the way that it worked was if you wanted to go to med school, you either needed to know someone or have gone to some, very prestigious school, had the money, quite frankly, to pay for med school, right? This was just how it was. And it was oftentimes you were admitted kind of on a handshake, right? So it's like, here, yes, welcome. But what they saw was that about 25% of students were actually failing out of med school, and they weren't ready to start med school. And also, medical schools were effectively only reaching students that were geographically close to them. And so as a means of med schools being able to reach a larger population and make sure that students were actually prepared for this exam, they started offering the predecessor to the MCAT, which now we call the MCAT. And as a result of that, they started to see their failure rates drop down. And today, we're in a world where less than 1% of students will not be able to finish their first year. And 9 times out of 10, that is for some personal reason. It is not because they are not academically ready to undertake the course of action necessary for medical school success. So there's a reason, there's a method behind the madness. I always like to tell students it's your opportunity to show them how awesome you are. So, keep that in mind, as it were, as you're thinking about this. The other side of prepping for the MCAT is making sure that you actually have built a study calendar. Now, today's session, we're not going to dive deep into the building of study calendars, but making sure that you have some type of calendar that you are holding yourself accountable to, right? Not just doing the thing where you say, oh, I've got plenty of time between now and when I got to take the test. I'll get to it, because we're really, really good at procrastinating, right? That's one thing that I've learned about myself, about human beings in general, is that we are the world's best procrastinators, right? I don't think there's any other species out there that procrastinates better than human beings. And so we are good procrastinators. So building up a study calendar, being able to, in fact, stick to it, and more importantly, adapt it along the way, right? You will discover things about yourself as you're studying this exam and realize, okay, I do need to put more emphasis over here. I need to put less emphasis over here. And so doing all those things is going to definitely be a big part of you being successful on this exam and moving forward. So that's going to be a big part of it, is building a good study calendar at the same time. Effectively using your time means, as the word effective is defined, making sure that every second that you're spending studying for this exam has a purpose. And what I mean by that is, I've seen lots of students through the years who say, oh, I'm studying, 20 hours per week or 30 hours per week for the MCAT. And I ask them, well, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm reading, flashcards, and I'm doing flashcards, and I'm reading my review books, and I'm watching YouTube videos. And I go, okay, what about practice problems? And they go, I'm not doing any practice problems. And I'm like, well, why aren't you doing practice problems? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? So making sure that what you're doing actually has a purpose to it. It's really easy to feel like you're accomplishing something, but in fact, you're not accomplishing anything because you're not actually effectively using your time. Part of that efficiency of time also comes down to this concept of spaced repetition. And spaced repetition is the idea where you are revisiting material over time. So you come back to material. The worst thing that you can do when studying for this exam is try to study all of the physics and then all of the chem and then all of the OChem. Because guess what? By test day, you will have forgotten it. So you got to kind of mix it up, is what it comes down to. That's the simple way of putting it, is it has to be mixed up as you're going through the material, as far as the content itself is concerned, as well as the activities that you are doing. So that's going to be kind of huge parts in all of this as you're preparing for this exam, and as you're looking through this, through the materials and through the work that you're ultimately doing. So very important to kind of keep all those things in mind, and very important to kind of consider all those things as you are thinking about this exam and as you're moving forward. If you've got questions about any of this, by all means, put them into the chat. That's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for the next 50 minutes, right? So ask the questions that you have so that we make sure that you get them answered, and we'll take it from there. So the question really that kind of comes into play here is, what's really being assessed on the MCAT? And you've probably heard the terms critical thinking skills, right? Raise your hand if you've heard critical thinking skills or critical reasoning skills. I mean, one of the sections is called the critical analysis and reasoning skills section of the exam, right? So that's not loose words. Those are very, very real words. And here's what the MCAT is actually assessing. The MCAT's actually assessing how well you are going to perform as a first and second year medical student. And it's doing so not only to know what content, how well you know your content, but at the same time, how well you're able to follow this process that you're going to have to be following when you are a medical student and when you're a practicing physician. Let me explain what I mean by this. So you think about your typical physician. When they go into an exam room, they've got the patient there, but they also have all of their prior knowledge, right? They have all the information that they've learned when they were in medical school, through their years of practice, right? They have all of that prior knowledge. That prior knowledge is, quite frankly, useless unless they're able to apply that knowledge, right? We oftentimes forget that, right? Knowing stuff is one thing, but being able to actually apply that information is another. Have you heard the joke? Is anyone, hopefully this will go well. Have you heard the joke about the engineer, the chemist, and the mathematician? Is this, am I going to totally like nerd out here for a second? Absolutely. So the chemist, the mathematician, and the engineer, they are all in a conference room, and they're having a meeting of some kind. And out of nowhere, the engineer's chair catches on fire. So what does the engineer do? Runs out to the hallway, finds the closest water fountain, finds a bucket, fills it up with as much water as he can, and dumps it on his chair, and he puts out the fire, right? So he puts out the fire, but unfortunately, what he's left with is a wet chair. So he's got to sit through the rest of the meeting in this wet chair. 5-10 minutes later, the chemist's chair catches on fire, and the chemist, being the chemist that he is, calculates the precise number of moles that he is going to need in order to be able to put out the fire. And he goes out to the water fountain, fills up the bucket, and pours the water onto his chair. And he has a perfectly dry chair because he perfectly calculated out the number of moles that he needed to put this fire out. 5 minutes go by. Somehow, miraculously, the mathematician's chair catches on fire. And the mathematician calculates out precisely how much water he's going to need to pour on his chair. And he looks at the engineer and he looks at the chemist and he says, I have the answer. And he continues to let his chair burn down. Where I'm going with this, of course, is it's not just good enough to know the answer to things. It's only good enough if you're able to apply the information, right? To actually put it into practice. And that's what the MCAT is requiring you to do. So the doctor has their prior knowledge. Okay, I got one laugh out of that joke. So thank you. Whoever laughed, thank you very much. That justifies that I should continue telling that joke. There's like 50 versions of that joke. It just always ends up with it. Hopefully no one's a mathematician and no one was insulted. But there's no insult meant, right? But the doctor knows all this information. The patient is actually giving the doctor new information, right? The patient comes in and says, here are my symptoms. I've got a rash, I've got a fever, I've got a cough, I've got a this, I've got a that, whatever it might be. What the doctor has to do then is they have to take their prior knowledge, they have to marry that with the new information that they've gathered from the patient, and they have to reason out a diagnosis. They have to say, this is what I think you have based on my experience, right? And based on my experience, this is the course of action. And not just based on my experience, but based on the facts, the evidence that we have in front of us, this is the course of action, the diagnosis that we're going to take with you. And that diagnosis might be surgery, it might be, antibiotics, it might be medicine, right? Whatever it might be, that's the course of action the doctor is going to take. You're doing the same thing on the MCAT. You go into the exam with prior information, with prior knowledge. The MCAT gives you new information in the form of passages and questions. You have to take your prior knowledge along with the new information that's been given to you and reason out, not a diagnosis, but you have to reason out an answer choice. And in an ideal world, you are reasoning out an answer choice, or at least the kind of parameters of what you want your answer choice to be before you're looking at the answer choices themselves. So you're going in with a prediction of what it is that you're looking for, because I can assure you that on the MCAT, there are 4 answer choices. The 3 that are wrong for a reason, right? They've deliberately put in those wrong answer choices. Oftentimes they are traps. Oftentimes they are, common miscalculations, whatever it might be. They are deliberate wrong answer choices. I always say this, it's easier to write a correct answer choice than it is to write an incorrect answer choice. In fact, you will spend more time writing an incorrect answer choice than you will spend time writing a correct answer choice, because you have to make sure that it's wrong for a really, really good reason. The analogy that I like to use, and this works well with students, which is why I keep using it, it's kind of like going grocery shopping. So there are 2 ways you can go grocery shopping. There's my way, which I, for whatever reason, continue to do, and then there's the correct way to go grocery shopping. The way I go grocery shopping, and maybe you're in this camp, I grab a cart and I kind of snake my way through the aisles, and I grab stuff off the shelf that I think is needed. And inevitably, I end up at home and I have too much of something, or I have forgotten to buy something that I needed to buy, right? Anyone else do this, right? You're just kind of like, okay, I need this. Oh yeah, I need milk. I need eggs. I need this, right? You just kind of go through it. And the worst place this happens is at Costco, because at Costco, you go there and they're like, there's just, yes, I do need, 2 dozen bars of whatever candy that they're trying to sell me, right? So, that's kind of one way to go grocery shopping. The better way to go grocery shopping, plain and simple, is you make a list and you go to the grocery store and you very specifically look for whatever's on your list. If it's not on the list, you're not even looking for it. That's the approach you want to take with answer choices. You want to go into the answer choice looking for something, as opposed to letting something find you. Because just like the grocery store, they're going to put those impulse buys in front of you, right? They're going to put those those kind of tricks that they're hoping that you fall for. Like, yes, I do need 3 12 packs of Coke because I get 3 for free if I buy 3. You don't realize that they've actually raised the price on the 12 packs of Coke or Diet Coke or whatever fits your fancy. So, that's the kind of the moral of the story is you got to go into the MCAT the same way you should ideally be going grocery shopping as you're going through here. So really important to kind of keep all that in mind. As far as all this is concerned, I see a couple questions have come in, and I haven't been ignoring you. Just wanted to get through these first couple slides before we go to them. Maya asked a good one as far as how far apart are you, pacing and moving practice materials as far as spaced repetition. It all depends really on your timeline. So the goal should be that you're always going back to material, ideally, no more than 3 weeks apart from each other. That way it's still fresh in your mind. You're able to kind of practice it. I think the simpler way of talking about spaced repetition is you need to mix it up, right? That's really the key, is kind of mixing it up is going to be what's going to be the best day for you. If you're testing, Ayushi, you said you're testing in September, haven't been effectively studying. Is changing my methods now too late? No, it's not. Especially if you're already saying, I'll just be very philosophical about this. If you're already saying you don't think it's working for you, then if you stick with the way that you've been doing it, it's still not going to work for you. So now is probably the time to change it up. And we can help you with that, right? We have tutors that can help you with kind of figuring out what it is that you should be studying and when you should be studying and all those things. So, if you're interested in that, let me know. Adeline, yes, Anki is very popular. It's great for spaced repetition. I won't make a recommendation for any one specific deck because everybody kind of chooses the one that tends to work well for them. The thing I will throw out there about Anki, there's not a ding on Anki. I think Anki is a great tool, but Anki does give you a false sense of comfort and security because it's mostly content review. And I've unfortunately had many conversations even this week with students of ours who are like, oh, but I've been doing Anki. And I'm like, yes, you've been doing Anki, but have you been actually practicing the application of the material? So really important to make sure that you're taking it taking it from there as it were. If you have forgotten, Naomi, if you've forgotten all the content from undergrad, you could do UWorld. And that's actually, I mean, any type of question practice is a good first step. And then go to whatever resources that you have available to you as far as content review. You don't want to go through all the pages of any books or any textbooks, right? Any review books that are out there. Definitely not a good approach at all to like start at the beginning and end at the end, because then you're just blanket covering everything. You need to go in targeted, right? You need to be very, very precise, as it were, as you go through. Donica, there are lots of free resources that are out there. I think if you just do a quick Google search of free resources, you'll find plenty as far as the MCAT is concerned. What I will say is that you definitely want to be using the AMC materials. They have some free stuff there as well, and then of course they have the paid materials, as it were. Raji, on the MCAT, the information that's given that's new in the passages, is the information given new in passages? Sometimes I'm seeing the content new. Is it that way? I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the passages you're seeing new information that you've never seen before, and that is how the MCAT is designed. So yes, in the passages you will see information that you've never seen before, or you've seen it a different way, and they're requiring you to use, surprise, surprise, your prior knowledge to be able to apply that, to interpret the new information that's been presented to you, so you can reason out your diagnosis, which is the answer choice. That is the exact way that the MCAT is ultimately going to be working and taking it from there. So that's the lay of the land, as it were. Okay, so if you got any more questions, let us know, and we'll answer them as we go through. But before we do that, let's take a look at an example MCAT question. Okay, this is a standalone question. It's not linked to a passage, but it's a very, very good question to demonstrate to you how this is all going to work. Okay, and let me kind of walk you through this so we can see how this is. And we're going to really kind of treat this the same way we would treat a dissection, right? I'm not going to don't jump to the answer, because this is really a learning process. I want to kind of walk you through the methodology of how you're going to have to look at this. So we've got a chemist. They're investigating an aqueous solution. So A is going to B and back. We're in equilibrium. Has a standard enthalpy change. They give us a value. Delta H is equal to 80 kilojoules per mole, and a standard entropy change where delta S is equal to 200 joules per mole per Kelvin. So we've got our standard numbers here, right? So this is what we've been given. And the question that they're asking us: under which of the following temperatures will the reaction proceed spontaneously under standard state conditions? So here's my first question to you. What formula, what concept should we be using if we want to figure out whether or not a reaction is going to be running spontaneously? So tell me, and let's use the introduce yourself chat. Let's use that as our conversation chat. What should this be as far as your formulas are concerned, the science that you've learned? What are we going to be using? This is a pop quiz. You weren't expecting. So Sasha says Gibbs free energy, and Sasha, you are correct. Shauna, you are correct, right? We're going to use Gibbs free energy. So that's going to be the formula that we're going to want to use. Now, before we use any type of formula, this is going to take much longer than you're actually going to have on the MCAT to do, but I want to walk you through the process and walk you through the thinking, because you can replicate this process and replicate this thinking pretty much with any given question. So they've given you delta H values and delta S values, and then in the answer choices, they've given you temperatures. So as soon as we see delta H, we see delta S, and we see T, what should trigger in our minds is the Gibbs free energy formula, right? The delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S, right? That we've seen that a number of times. But the second thing that you have to then say to yourself, well, what else do I know about Gibbs free energy. If I am in equilibrium, what is the delta G value? Everyone all at once. This should be like ingrained in your minds. So talk about content to know. This should be ingrained in your minds as far as this information is concerned. What's the what? If delta G, if you're in equilibrium, what is the delta G going to be equal to? Not negative. We're at equilibrium. Equilibrium. I didn't ask whether we're spontaneous or non-spontaneous. I'm at equilibrium. Delta G is always going to be a big fat zero, right? That's what it's going to be. So Nate, Sasha, exactly. That's it. It's going to be a big fat zero. So that all known, right? That side of it is good. We then go and say to ourselves, great. If we are going to be looking at spontaneous conditions, what is the delta G going to be have to be? What's the delta G have to be as a situation if we're going to be in a spontaneous situation? Spontaneity is going to be negative, right? Less than zero. And non-spontaneous conditions, just for the sake of completion, is going to be greater than zero. So less than zero, I'm spontaneous. Zero, I'm at equilibrium. Non-spontaneous, I'm above zero. Question here is asking us, which of these temperatures will give us a spontaneous condition? So we are looking for a situation where delta G will end up being negative, will be less than zero. So one of these four temperatures is going to give us a result of delta G equaling a negative value. Now here's the second thing. We look at these answer choices, and we could very easily, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am. I'm very opinionated when it comes to this question. We could very easily just plug and chug four answer choices, right? We could literally say delta G equals delta H, which we know is 80, because they told us that, minus 298 times 200, calculate it out, and figure out if that delta G gives us a negative value. Then we could do the same thing with 350. We can do the same thing with 400. We can do the same thing with 500. Does it make sense from a time commitment on the exam, which you are already under lots and lots of pressure? Does it make sense to go through and do all of that math? Yes or no? Hopefully you're picking up on my tone here. Yes or no? Does it make sense to do that? What do you think? Makes zero sense, right? That is a waste of your time, right? It is a waste of your time. Here's the mantra. I want you to write this down. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time. Not that that means anything, but trust me on this. The mantra I want you to write down is that you want to be efficiently lazy. Do the work you need to do to get to the right answer. Don't do any more work than you need to do, right? That's the bottom line. So that's how I want you to be approaching this exam moving forward, is this efficiency that is laziness, right? Just do the minimal amount of work, just get the question right. So we're going to take a pause here for a second. And the pause we're going to take is just to look at these answer choices. We got 298, we have 350, we have 400, and we have 500. Let's make our life easy. Let's not think about it as 298, 350, 400, and 500. Let's think about it as 300, 400, and 500. And I'll tell you why here in a second. You'll see why here in a second. All right, so that's, just think of that way. 300, 400, 500. We're going to kind of find the middle grounds here is what we're going to do. Because I don't want to be doing, I'm lazy. I don't want to do 298 times 200. I don't want to do 350 times 200. I just want to do 300, 400, and 500. Because if I do 300 times 200, right, for the T delta S, that's a lot easier, quite frankly, is what it comes down to. So that's the first part. The second part is you can write this down, and you can actually keep this for future work with Gibbs free energy. So here's your Gibbs free energy formula, right? Delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. We've got this Cartesian coordinate plane. We're over here on this x-axis. We're defining this as the delta S. On the y-axis, we're identifying that as the delta H. So let's just do some fun critical thinking. If I have a positive delta H, that means that this number over here in my Gibbs free energy is going to be positive. And if I have a negative delta S, so I'm in this quadrant over here on the left, right? The upper left-hand quadrant. And my delta S value is negative, and my delta H value is positive. If I have a negative sign in the Gibbs free energy, then whatever the temperature is times a negative S value is going to be subtracted. So that's really like I'm adding. So in the upper left-hand quadrant, quadrant 2 of the Cartesian coordinate plane, if you remember your Cartesian coordinate plane nomenclature, what value am I always going to get regardless of temperature? What value will I always be achieving in the upper left-hand corner? If I've got a positive delta H, negative delta S, that's being subtracted from a positive, right? So the T is always going to be positive because Kelvin's always positive. Positive times a negative that's being subtracted is the same as addition. So in the upper left-hand corner, my delta G is always going to be positive, which means I'm going to be non-spontaneous. Right? I'm going to be non-spontaneous. So that's not the area that we're looking at. For this question specifically, they care about this area over here, this over on the lower right-hand corner. I'm not sure if you can see my arrow. Can you see my arrow? Maybe you can't. For some reason. Anyway, lower right-hand corner, quadrant 4, right? That's where I'm going to get my negative numbers, right? You can't see the arrow. Okay. Fix that for next time. Sorry about that. I realized I was putting my cursor there, and then I realized you might not see where where I'm putting the cursor. So my apologies. So lower right-hand corner, quadrant number 4, that is going to be where we are going to have our negative value, because here delta S is going to be a positive number. And regardless of what the temperature is, we're going to be subtracting a positive number from a negative delta H. So negative delta H minus a positive number is going to become more negative, right? We're always going to have spontaneity in that region. So what we refer to as these two regions is the upper left-hand quadrant. That is your non-spontaneous conditions, and it's temperature independent. The lower right-hand quadrant is going to be spontaneous conditions, but temperature independent as well. So, the upper left and the lower right, they're diagonal to each other. They are the temperature independent regions. The temperature dependent regions are going to be the other two, the upper right-hand quadrant and the lower left-hand quadrant. Okay, this is where the temperature is going to matter. And this is actually pretty important fundamentally from the perspective of how Gibbs free energy is going to ultimately be working for you, right? So this is going to be a big part of this. So in the question, right, the question that we saw, they told us that the delta H was positive and the delta S was positive. So the region that we're living in is actually this upper right-hand region. So we are in a temperature dependent region. So here's what we have to do. We have to say, okay, if my delta H is 80, as given to us in the problem, and my delta S is 200, as given to us in the problem, now I can actually look at this from a conceptual perspective and make sure that what I end up with, as far as my values are concerned, is I end up with a situation in which I am, in fact, going to be at the multiples, right, at the right magnitude, where I end up with a negative value. But there's one little twist that they threw into the question. Can anyone tell me what the twist is that's in the question? It's very subtle, but it's there. There's always a twist, right? It's like a good movie. There's this twist at the end where you say, oh, I totally missed that. I could have missed that. What's the twist that they gave us on this one? The units difference. Yeah, right? They give us delta H in kilojoules. They give us delta S in joules. So you got to be careful, because if you don't catch that, then you're going to turn around and say, well, at any of these temperatures, right? Any of these temperatures, it's going to be spontaneous, because if I do 200 times 298, or 300 if I'm being lazy, or 400 if I'm being lazy, or 500 if I'm being lazy, that's always going to be a number that's so positive that if I'm subtracting that from 80, I'm going to end up with a negative number. So any of them could potentially be negative, and then any of them would end up being a delta G that's less than 0. Who thinks that's tricky? I do. Right? But that's very normal for the MCAT. You have to be on the lookout. So the reason why this is important is that you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm doing 80 kilojoules minus 200 joules times whatever the temperature is, but then I got to divide by 1,000, right? Then I have to divide by 1,000. So here's how we're going to do it. We say, okay, if we start at answer choice D, which is the highest temperature, right? We start at the highest temperature. 500 times 200 is going to give us what number? So you can add up the zeros, right? So 200 times with 2 extra zeros, that's going to be 20,000. Multiply that by 5. That's 100,000 joules. 100,000 joules. Divide that by 1,000 for the kilojoule conversion. You have 100. So if we go back to our formula of delta G is equal to delta H 80 minus 100, we would end up with, right? We would end up with a value that was negative 20, and that would be spontaneous. And that would be our correct answer, right? Just because I happened to start with the last answer choice. If we'd started with 300, it would have been, it would have been 300 times 200, right? So 300 times 200, the 200 is going to become 20,000. Multiply that by 3, that's 60,000. Divide that by 1,000 because it's converting to kilojoules. And then there would just be 80 minus 60, right? And so you'd end up with a positive value of 20. Okay? So the correct answer for this one is answer choice D, right? That's the only one that's going to give us a spontaneous value, which actually allows us to complete this chart. And here's what I mean by this. Remember, upper left-hand corner, you're always going to end up with what type of reaction? Positive delta H, negative delta S. You're always going to end up with a positive delta G, so this is always going to be non-spontaneous. Lower right-hand corner, or lower right-hand quadrant, that's your spontaneous region. These are the two that were independent of temperature. The other two are dependent of temperature. This upper right-hand quadrant number 1, that is temperature dependent, and you're going to be spontaneous at high temperatures. Versus the lower left-hand quadrant is temperature dependent, but it's the opposite. So the delta S is going to be negative. You're going to be subtracting a number from the temperature. So you're going to be, if in order to get to a spontaneous number, right, you can then do the math and say, okay, how can I fill this in, right? So basically you have your temperature independent regions and you have your temperature dependent regions at the end of the day. Okay, so that's the key with all of these is what it comes down to. So it's the opposite of what it looks like. So the correct answer for this one has to be answer choice D, right? That's the only answer that's going to work. Yes, every section has a little trick, or every question, I should say, will have a little trick, right? They'll have a little, and it's not a trick. It's, quite frankly, they want to make sure that you're paying attention, right? It's the same trick that, not trick, it's the same kind of screening device that lawyers use. Now, this is not a field that you're going into, but it's important for you to be aware of it. Lawyers will always, when they're kind of screening their witnesses before they put them on the stand, they'll ask them, do you have the time? And 9 times out of 10, people look at their watch or their phone and they say, yeah, I got the time. It's 9:45. And then they realize that wasn't the question that was actually being asked. The question that was being asked was, do you have the time? And it's a yes or no answer. So yes, that's how the MCAT works, is they want you to be able to identify even these little tiny nuances. So that one little letter K can make the world of difference between choosing A, B, C, or D versus choosing D, which was the correct answer, is the correct answer for a question like this. You like that? Fun times? Looking forward to more when you go study for the MCAT and go do this, right? Take this thing. I mean, that's how this thing is going to test you. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as as it were. As far as building these skills, and what we did here just now with that one question is we basically did 2 things, right? We practiced the application. Actually, we did more than 2 things. We practiced the application. We recalled content that we needed to know, right? The information that they didn't give you in that question was the value of delta, or was the formula for delta G. So we had to recall that information. That's from our own knowledge. We had to know how to apply it. We had to, look out for the little tricks that are there. And quite frankly, had to find the efficiency so that we're not plugging in every single answer choice. Right now, we happen to start with answer choice D, and the reason we started with answer choice D was purely random, right? If I'd started with 300 as opposed to 298 or the 350 that was there, we would have very quickly seen that that is not spontaneous. And then you would have to check 400 and see that that's not spontaneous. General recommendation is when you have answer choices that are numbers that you do need to plug into a formula, start with one of the 2 extremes, right? So start with either the highest one or the lowest one. Because if you start with the lowest one and it doesn't work, then you know that then you should go to the highest one. If the highest one works, then that's your answer. If it doesn't work, then you go to the middle 2 that are there. So just something to kind of keep in mind as far as time saving. That's all it is. It's a time saving approach. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Most of the times it does, is what it is. As far as building your skills, if you think about your timeline, and this I think will answer the question that a couple of you have as far as like what I should be doing as far as paths are concerned, as far as time goes. Really the way this works is if you think about the left-hand side of the screen as the start of your MCAT prep and the right-hand side of your screen as test day, it would be incorrect to say that you're doing the same thing as you progress through your MCAT prep journey, all right? The reality is that at the beginning of the day, you are going to be spending more time reviewing content and developing your critical thinking skills. You should not be taking full-length exams aside from a diagnostic. You should not be, spending too much time doing too many questions. You should be doing some questions to reinforce the skills from the content review and the critical thinking skills, but the bulk of your time is going to be spent reviewing content and retaining that content. And retention of the content will involve doing practice problems. As the time progresses, you're going to be practicing more of the application and the endurance skills and actual practice and review of questions. And you're going to want to diminish your content review. This is what I meant by, Anki can be misleading because you think you feel good about yourself, but you end up getting stuck in this kind of content review building period of time, and that is the place that it kind of can fall apart relatively quickly. So just something to keep in mind as you're kind of building through these things. As far as diagnostic exams are concerned, the best one to take is the one from the AMC. There's a free one from the AMC that's scored. The reason why I say that is they have no bias. They have no desire to try to make the test harder than it actually is. It's just, here's an assessment of how you would be doing. So that's it's free, as it were. You can take those. I know, that they're there, but they're also there for a reason, oftentimes a marketing reason. I will say that it won't be, this is like down the line for us, but we are in the process of trying to build out some full-length exams ourselves that are representative of things that we'll make available to students for free. The building a good exam, though, is a very long process, so we can't. It'll be a while, is what it comes down to. So for those of you testing next year, we'll have them. But for those of you testing this year, unfortunately, not something we have yet here at med school headquarters for sure. So something to keep in mind, as it were. That all being said, we kind of alluded to this. We're gonna do a bunch of things. So I won't go into the details just yet, but yes, there will be lots of testing. Is what it comes down to. That's the fun part about building tests. Is to build a test, you have to test the test. Is what it comes down to. So very smart people get involved, right? Called psychometricians, and take it from there. All right, well, you'll know about it when it's out. It'll be a while though, and when I say a while, I mean like probably early 26 is what it comes down to. So takes a long time. To make a good test. I only like things to be out there once they're actually really good and vetted. So that's the way I operate. That all being said, as far as study calendars themselves are concerned, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but whatever you do, build a study calendar, right? Make sure that your study calendar is realistic. You're not trying to study 10 hours per day, 7 days a week or 8 days a week, right? You want to make sure that it's realistic. You want to make sure that it has achievable goals built into it. You want to make sure that it has downtime, right? Make sure that it has time for you to rest and to recharge, as it were, because that's going to be very, very important to you. And then at the same time, making sure that you are, in fact, dedicating time to reviewing your practice questions and practice exams and actually analyzing your own performance as you're going through this, so that you're not falling into that trap of what very easily could happen, which is like, I'm just going to take practice tests, I'm going to take practice tests. That all being said, if you need help, especially if you're testing relatively soon, we do offer live tutoring. So it's one-on-one. It's completely custom designed. We don't have a regimented program where we say, this is what you're doing on day one, this is what you're doing on day two. We literally build every single study plan based around the student. To give you some examples, we've got one student right now who's actually doing a little bit of review of OChem before they take OChem 2, and then they're going to study for the MCAT in the fall, right? We had another student recently who needed some more physics help as far as the MCAT itself was concerned. So it just kind of all depends on where the needs are for you and what it is. And that's how we work. We're very student centered. We are not a big corporation. We are not trying to teach the masses. We are trying to teach the individual students. So if that's something you're looking for, everything that we do is problem-based learning, the way that we saw here today a little bit. More importantly, we've got a rock star team. I couldn't be prouder of the team. We literally got back. We've been getting back results, but today I got an email from a parent who said, my son won't tell you, but they just got a 521 on the MCAT. And I was like, that is awesome, right? That is and they'd worked with one of our tutors, and now have lots and lots of doors open to them as far as the application itself is concerned. So, and they did not start close to that number, right? So, bottom line is, we will get you ready for this exam, and we'll be in your corner along the way to really help you build that mastery and such. So if you want to find out more about the tutoring programs that we have, set up a meeting with me. That's a direct link there to my calendar, and we can kind of walk you through what the different tutoring options are that we have available. At the same time, med school headquarters, of course, we take care of you from start to finish. So most of our resources, including for the MCAT, as we move forward, but most of our resources are free. So we have tons and tons of free resources. But if you are looking to work more one-on-one with someone, as far as your application is concerned, we have a rockstar team of former medical school deans and directors of admission who will work with you to edit essays, figure out what to write about, what to not write about, how to prepare for your interviews, all the things. So we will literally help you from start to finish, from academic tutoring to MCAT prep to the actual application as well. So we have it all covered, is what it comes down to. So with that said, big thank you to each and every one of you for joining us here tonight. Keep an eye out for more free events that will be coming up from us here. We'll be doing a whole bunch of them throughout the summer, and we're looking forward to getting all your questions answered. Feel free to set up time to have a chat with us as far as the different services that we provide and how we can help support you as you work towards wearing a white coat. So with that said, thank you all for joining us. I think I answered everyone's questions. I feel like I did as we were going through here. So for some reason you feel like I didn't, just type it in again. Riley, maybe I didn't answer yours. If you're studying for 6 months, how many days do I recommend to keep up with classes? If you're studying for 6 months and you're in school, it's about building a nice balanced schedule. So I would recommend that you get some help doing so, because it's not as easy as just saying like, here's how many hours that is going to be per day, because your days are going to vary, your weeks are going to vary. You're going to be studying more early on, a little less middle, and a little more towards the end, right? So it just kind of will vary along the way, as it were. So that's probably the way to do it. You could memorize all the equations and write them all down. That's going to take you time, though, once the exam starts. So I don't know if that's the best use of your time, quite frankly. You do need to know the equations. And also, through practice, you will learn the equations, right? So that's the key. But I wouldn't say it makes sense when you're taking the test to like spend 5 minutes writing them all down for the once or twice that you will get. So you should get a copy of the recording, Naomi. I think it'll go out tomorrow. Like once it gets published, it'll go right out. So if you were registered for this, you will get it. As long as you haven't unsubscribed from emails from us, you'll get this. So remind me what MSA is. Even though I live in a world of acronyms, sometimes they escape me. Just remind me what that one is for. We primarily do medical school, and I don't know if we have anyone with experience in that, but you can send us an email at team@medschoolheadquarters.net and ask and see if we have that, and they'll follow up with you for sure. We also do PA, right? So cool. All right. Well, thanks all for joining us. If you have any further questions, oh, wait a minute. There were some questions over here. Non-traditional student. Well, my advice for a non-traditional student versus a traditional student, or traditional, non-traditional, is the same, right? You have to make sure that you're solid on your content. It's literally the slide I showed earlier. You got to make sure you're solid on your content. And then once you're solid on your content, and as you're building your content, start practicing the application. It might take you a little bit longer, not because you're a non-traditional student, just because it's been a while since you've seen the content, right? That's the, as you mentioned here. So, that's the, so it might just take you a little longer because it's been more time since you actually had to use, use the material. So that's the thing. Cool. All right. Well, have a great rest of your evening. And nope, it's this slide here. So Naomi, it's this slide here. So content review, build your critical thinking skills, build your build your content, and that will diminish. Oh, you don't see my cursor. So left-hand side of the screen, right? Content review, critical thinking skills, that will diminish, and then your application practice will increase as you're moving through. All right, so that's going to be the key for all of it. Cool stuff. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. You're all very welcome. Have a great rest of your night.